Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the After the Frame podcast. My name is Malik, and I am joined, as always, by.
Hi, I'm Matt.
And today, in this review, we are going to be tackling Wicked for Good. Alden, were you a big fan of the first one that came out last year?
I was. Musicals are not my forte typically, but the first one was a pleasant surprise for me.
Okay, yeah, I'm the same. I mean, I'm same as I enjoyed the first one, but musicals are more my forte. I enjoy a good musical if it's done right, but I feel like that genre, it's very difficult to do it right. It can borderline on the goofy, obviously. But yeah, I was very excited for this one because I grew up watching, The Wizard of Oz. Like my parents showed me those like old classic stuff. So when I found out that this story was kind of going to expand on the lore of Wizard of Oz, I had never obviously seen the play, so I was very interested to see where they go with it. A bit of a spoiler for how I felt about the second one. I feel like it's not the most consistent with the Wizard of Oz, which kind of brought it down for me compared to the first one, but we'll get into it when we get into it. Did you have any specific thoughts going into the second one, or were you just expecting it to be kind of the same as the first for you?
Well, from my understanding, I think they shot both 1 and 2 back to back.
Mhm.
So, my expectations were pretty on par with the first one, thinking it was gonna kinda retain that similar, size, scale, scope, and just transition pretty evenly from the first to the sequel. But nothing really, no higher bar or anything, just kinda expecting more of the same.
Okay. My I ended up seeing it Friday, and I think it came out like on a Wednesday. So I had unfortunately started hearing like, a few people the murmurs of how people felt about it. And yeah, majority of people said they were a little bit more disappointed, but then I spoke to some friends who have seen the original play on Broadway, which I find very crazy that actually all from everything that happens in part 1 and part 2 is condensed into a 2-hour play. And I find that very weird that they must have rushed through everything. But yeah, when I speak to those who enjoyed the actual play, everybody seems to have the consensus that the second act, or Wicked for Good Part Two, is the weaker of the two. So I went in kind of a little bit more wary of that, and I still feel like it didn't really like surpass the first one for me. Mm, how about for you?
Yeah, I concur. I'm surprised how wide of a gap there is for me between the first one and the second one. Not saying the second one is bad by any
Hmm.
means, but there's a sizable gap between how I feel about the first and second one. I mean, if you're a fan of the franchise, if you're a fan of the first one, if you're a fan of the Oz universe, I mean, it's still worth seeing, especially being the follow-on to such a strong first one. But yeah, I was in a similar boat, just kind of down a little bit. So, and yeah, we can get into why.
Okay. For me, last year when I watched part one, I remember, and I don't know if you've obviously seen The Wizard of Oz, I assume. After I watched part one, I remember like telling everybody, I was like, they're gonna have to do a very big character shift for Elphaba in the second one, or else things aren't really gonna be adding up for me. Cause I hadn't seen The Wizard of Oz for maybe like 5 years. And then after I watched part one last year, I said, let me just rewatch The Wizard of Oz to remind myself of what's going on, because I heard that in the second part, a lot of it plays into, Dorothy and everything. And I also rewatched The Wizard of Oz right before watching the sequel. And I'm going to talk more about it when we get to the stuff that doesn't work for us, all the specific instances that just don't make sense to me. And that was my big gripe with the movie. But we can start off with the good first, and you can go ahead and say all the stuff that you liked, what worked for you in the movie. And I'll say mine.
Yeah. So before I dive into it, I've actually got an even number of points for what worked and didn't work for me. So it's
Okay.
kind of in the middle.
Okay.
As far as what worked, the first thing for me, I want to touch on the main leads. You've got Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande's performances, and those two powerhouse performances really kind of carry the film between Elphaba's emotional range and Glinda's, energy and precision. There, I thought it was really nothing short of magnetic into the film, and their chemistry really kind of anchors the story. You believe in their friendship, rivalry, shared fate, all of that. And both of them bring their A game vocally, even if the film's sound mix didn't always let their power shine through. That was one thing I noticed from the first one to the second one is the sound mixing quality wasn't entirely there. Secondly, the casting choices. A lot of the casting I thought was, some pretty genuinely inspired moves to make. And, largely carrying over from the first one, but a lot of the casting decisions are they feel tailor made for their roles, and it's easily some of the best casting in a musical adaptation I've seen in years. And I don't watch that many, but you can tell that they fully understand their characters. Both manage to honor the stage versions while really giving their roles a cinematic identity. Carrying over into that, a lot of the musical highlights and new songs I was a fan of. Not every number soared in my mind, but the best songs that are performed, they absolutely deliver. And the big emotional duets and reprises, and I mean the new original songs, they show glimpses of brilliance and kind of help differentiate this chapter from the first film. Diving into my fourth bullet here, production design and world building. Visually, this film maintains the lush fantasy sort of appeal of its predecessor between the bright colors, the set design, the costuming. They still have that fairy tale grandeur that audiences enjoyed in part one, like myself. And it really feels like a complete world, just in my opinion, just one that was struggling under the weight of its own story. And then lastly, just talking about emotional resonance, because it does land at times. And when it lands, it's really good. And there are those moments that really hit. You've got the themes of friendship, fate, legacy, those still resonate with you. But when the film slows down and lets the characters feel instead of explaining, it kind of captures that magic that made the first one feel so beloved. That's everything I had for my positives that I want to highlight.
Okay. I mean, a lot of ours are probably going to be overlapping. When I do my negatives, I will maybe go back and forth so that way, like we're just not repeating. And but yeah, I 100% agree with the acting. It's because everything, as you said earlier, was shot back to back. A lot of the good from the first just carries over into the second. So, the acting, the costumes, who, yeah, I forget the guy's name, but he won best costume design at the Oscars last year. I'm sure he'll be up for it again. Everything stays so consistent from the first one, so all the visuals stay very consistent. The music for me was good but not great, especially compared to the first part. But I'll get into that, into the things that didn't really work. Other than that, I'd say that the film took its time, like you said. I completely don't understand how they squeezed everything into just 1 2 hour story, but I really like that they were able to even add their own original songs. You get to really like sit there and breathe with each of the characters, find out each and every one of their motivations, how they're feeling about certain things. It kind of got rushed to me towards the end in some parts, but nothing too much that really like took me out the movie. But yes, you basically said like majority of the things that I also found positive about it. And as you said earlier, anybody who enjoyed the first one will enjoy all the aspects that they carry over again. Nothing really diminishes too much. So yeah, that's all of my positives. Going into the things that didn't work for me, as I mentioned already, the big thing for me was kind of really anticipating where they're gonna tie into everything with the Wizard of Oz. I was unaware that actually in the play you don't see Dorothy's face either, and I found it weird, I guess, seeing the movie that you never really see the actress who plays her. She's kind of just like seen in the background. You just see her back like while she's walking off or whatever. And that, not to say that didn't work for me. I would have preferred like if we actually had like an actual actress that was like, a part of it, but I guess, it's not her story. But the consistency between that and then the original Wizard of Oz movie just isn't there. Spoilers. I mean, we're doing this podcast. Anybody listening knows that we spoil this stuff. But yeah, we find out in the movie that certain characters from the first one turn into the iconic characters from the original movie. Fiyero turns into the Scarecrow, and Bach turns into the Tin Man. And I felt as though that doesn't really land when you think in the context of the original Wizard of Oz movie, because Bach and Fiyero both went to school together, both know each other. Yet in the original Wizard of Oz, when they all meet up with Dorothy, they don't really recognize each other. The Elphaba does not interact with them along their walk to the Emerald City. In this movie, she kind of just gets fed up with everything, with her big song No Good Deed, and she sends the flying monkeys to go and kidnap Dorothy, and that's really all the interaction she has with everyone. And then I felt like the scene with Nessa and Bach, where he turns into the Tin Man, that was the part where I thought was very rushed. It was very like reactionary, that she was just looking in the book and saying spells, and then the spell conveniently just worked in like a way, but it twisted it like a genie's wish. So that's my first bullet point. I'll let you go ahead and say if you have anything within that. that category that you want to speak on.
A couple things that kind of fall into that umbrella.
Hmm.
So my first bullet was just talking about pacing and structure because really to me it felt like the film was caught between, I don't know if you've seen Whiplash, but rushing or dragging.
Mm,
It was caught in the middle of there, and
okay.
some major story beats, fly by while these smaller subplots kind of lingered, and that uneven pacing for me left those emotional moments underdeveloped, like that one you mentioned, and others were stretched thin. I mean, it you pick and chose, which ones you wanted to focus on, and in my opinion, it was the classic case of a sequel just trying to cover too much ground and not really giving those key scenes time to breathe. But when it comes to the storytelling, I think it was just overstuffed. There's simply too much going on. It's trying to balance the legacy characters, these new arcs, this world building, and emotional closure, and all at once. And in my opinion, the result is a movie that feels big and busy, but it's not always focused. And in my opinion, the story never really quite finds that same clarity or the punch that made the first one do so well. But also within that, I mean, it felt like there were some boxed in adaptation choices because thinking about the creative team making this film, they probably did have limited freedom between they were probably stuck between honoring the lore from the original film and the universe as well as the original Wicked, stage musical. And you can really feel the tension. I mean, moments that could have been bold are kind of played safe to stay canon compliant, but going to the ending, for me it made for an ending that felt more obligatory than truly cathartic.
Yeah, I can understand all of that. I think for me, when you talk about like the focus, yeah, I think that the first movie was more focused on the relationship or lack thereof in the beginning of Elphaba and Glinda. And then towards the end, they become friends. This one seemed to me more like Glinda's movie a bit. Like she's the one that kind of had like a full arc. But I felt like, as I said, the characters kind of have they explain their motivations, but they don't really make too much sense. Like just because somebody has a reason for doing it doesn't mean that their reason is like valid. Like the Cowardly Lion, for instance, in the first part, we see there's like a scene where like the guards are bringing in this lion cub, and then Elphaba has the thing with Fiero and makes everybody fall asleep and whatnot, and then they take the cub and release it back out into the wild. Come to find out in this movie, the Cowardly Lion is like against that and is saying, "Oh well, she's the one that like released me, and now I'm like so afraid or something." And I was like, they could have figured out. Like I know, as you said, they're trying to pay homage to all the different source material, but they could have figured out a more like a clever way of like why the lion might, what I mean. But
Yeah.
I felt like that type of stuff was where I was like, like it just doesn't really make any sense. Moving on to the next thing, because I found it interesting that you mentioned the casting. I feel like the casting is all very good, and it was very good even in the first one. But for some reason in this one, um, Michelle Yeoh's character, she felt very out of place. Like the actress felt out of place in the role. I felt like because in the first one maybe it was more dialogue based, she got away with it and she didn't have that big of a role. This one she's basically acting as like the advisor to the wizard and is kind of pulling the strings as well. So you see a little bit more of her. And in my humble opinion, I don't think that Michelle Yeoh is the best singer, honestly. And the parts that she has in the few songs that she has or parts in songs, I feel like kind of are a little, the case of like, hiring Chris Pratt to play Mario. Like, we're just got a big name to fill this in when like we could have found like another actress that could actually sing and whatever. So that's my one thing with her. Did you feel the same way with that, or did you not really catch on to
Yeah,
or
no,
did
I
you
mean
not really feel that way?
that's a good point. One of my other bullets was going to talk about the either misappropriated vocal power or the lack of vocal power kind of in the mix. Oddly to me, this film didn't always let its strongest asset, the voices shine. And I think, the argument of casting, do you want musical artists? Do you want actors, actresses? Do you want somewhere in the middle? That's always going to exist because it's like, if a studio wants a film to do well commercially, then they're going to look at actors who can give good performances. But if you want a musical, it may not, there's always going to be that disconnect.
Mhm.
And in my opinion, like with the roles, but also the sound design, I thought it honestly kind of occasionally buried the vocals under just swelling orchestration and just dulling moments that should have been goosebump inducing, but they're just kind of throwing things with darts and seeing what sticks.
Yeah. And then that plays into my next point is just the music in general. The music is not bad by any means, especially, because you stated that there's so many good, talented singers in the movies that across both of them, the music's going to be good. For me, breaking them up into a part one and part two, this soundtrack to me was a little underwhelming. Again, since I like literally don't know any of like the famous songs or anything going into it, I'm just going in like trying to be as blind as I can. But I didn't feel like the songs, bar from like maybe two of them, which were the two that I heard in the trailer. So I'm assuming they're the more popular ones in like the theater crowd. None of them were really memorable to me or really packed like a punch like a lot of the ones in the first one did. That's not really to say, as I said, that they're bad, but like very underwhelming, I think, just as a part two. And then a second part to that, to me, this movie felt more like a forced musical a lot of the time. I felt as though this movie, one of the things I did like about it was kind of diving more into the politics and the plot, and even dealing with the wizard and his song, talking about like how the public perceive the truth, which we see a lot of in like our real life today. Sometimes people don't really want to hear the truth. They want to believe what they want to believe, so on and so forth. I like that aspect, but at the same time, I just felt like it could have used just more dialogue sometimes. It just felt as though we were cutting to a scene and then we're like, oh, we're going to find out like something more. It's going to move the plot forward. And it was almost like, the creators were like, crap, it's a musical. We have to throw a musical number in here. Again, I can't you'll see in my rating, I don't fault the movie too much for this. I still gave it like a fairly high rating, I think, because I think that they just copied the source material. If I had watched the play, I think I'd be a lot more harsh since it's like the original. But because this is just copying the source material, I don't want to, double down and like say that they did this, because it's not like they wrote it. It's not an original thing from the writers of this, the screenplay. But yeah, that's how I felt about the song sometimes. I felt like I was like, we're immediately going into another song and I was like, and then the song is not that memorable. We didn't really need it. We could have just kept moving forward. So did you feel the
Right.
same with some of those songs, or did you find it a little bit more catchy?
No, I felt the same because I mean, they were kind of taking in, hey, it's a musical and just throwing things at you left and right.
Yeah. And that's basically all of the stuff that didn't work for me. Obviously, the big one for me was the whole, tying into the Wizard of Oz thing. But I could go on and on. We could just do a whole podcast on like literally every little thing that I found that was inconsistent between the movies. But I've seen online now that people are basically saying to not look at it like that. It's so consistent with the original movie because basically they're saying that, oh, Wicked is like like you could say like a fanfic, almost like the Cursed Child in Harry Potter,
Hmm.
where it's like quote unquote canon, like J.K. Rowling wrote it, but it kind of is inconsistent with the other books. And, it kind of, within the fandom, people are kind of like, don't like really listen to that type of stuff. So I'm trying to look at it through that lens, but it's kind of tough. But those are my negatives.
Yeah, I mean, the only other one I had could be controversial if it's considered a negative or not, but really just kind of comparing it to part one. And I mean, coming off a surprisingly strong first film, like I genuinely was not anticipating watching the first one. And then I sat down and watched it and I was like, that was actually really good. But this one, the sequel just can't escape that comparison, which could be a flaw. It could not be, depends on how you look at it. But either way, it's a noticeable step down. I felt as though the emotional highs aren't as high as they are in the first, and those dramatic beats don't land as hard. Where part one really just kind of felt magical and fresh. I mean, granted, it was something new for the time. This one just sometimes feels like it's checking boxes following the sequel instead of just conjuring wonder and trying to do something new.
Yeah, I completely can understand where you're coming from with that. I think that's every sequel's problem. It's always going to be, is it as good as the first one? People say that, oh, the second movie is never as good as the first one. It's inevitable. I'm interested as we wrap it up, like how you said that it's a really big step down for you. For me, I felt like the things that were different within the movie didn't like ruin it for me, like watching it. And another thing too, I watched it in IMAX and I watched it around presumably a lot of theater kids and people that grew up watching the play. And sometimes those things influence like how I enjoy a movie, and just seeing how everybody in my movie theater, it was like their version of Infinity War or Endgame. Like people were like applauding, people were like crying at points, like towards the end, like people were sobbing. So all of that like goes into like how like it obviously means a lot to people. It's doing really well at the box office. It's like 150 million in the first weekend. So it to me it didn't detract so much from the first one. The first one to me is definitely better, but not to a very large degree in my opinion. So just wrapping up, you have anything else you wanted to say for positives or negatives, or are we good to just go straight into the
No,
final thoughts?
we can carry on.
Yeah, so you can go ahead and give your score first, and yeah, and just your final thoughts on the movie as a whole, and anything else you want to say.
Yeah, so before I give this score away, I will dive into and tell you what gave the original.
Okay.
Uh, so the first one, just to show how high I was on it and how pleasantly surprised I was. The first one I gave a 9.1 out of 10.
Wow, a lot
Yeah,
higher than I gave it.
and to put it into scale for this one, I gave this one a 6.5 out of 10. Um,
Okay.
for me, the film still, I guess, final takeaway. The film still sparkles at times. You've got it's powered by two incredible leads and some moments of genuine spectacle, but it is bogged down by uneven pacing, overstuffed storytelling, and the limits of adaptation. There is plenty to admire, but yeah, it just never quite soars to the heights of its predecessor.
Okay. For me, the first movie I gave an 83%. I'm switching now to the percentage as well instead of doing the out of 10 now. I'm trying something different. We'll see. We'll see how it is in the next video if I switch back. But yeah, so it's 83% for me for the first one, and this one I actually gave a 77%. It's a lot higher than what I see a lot of people are saying, but as I said, for me, the good outweighs the bad a lot more, or not even the bad, but the disappointing, I should say. And just like the chemistry between Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande, the music, while the actual musical numbers aren't that memorable, the score and everything within the background of stuff that isn't an actual song is still really good. The CGI holds up pretty good, like same as the first one with the flying monkeys and all of the animals that are trying to escape Oz and everything. Jeff Goldblum is always a treat. I liked him better in this one. I thought like he had a lot more comedic moments. And yeah, I think that like the cast as a whole, and as well the visuals of everything kind of just like brought it up for me. If it had kind of faltered, I would have brought it down a little bit. But to me, 77% good movie. I recommend watching it in theaters, the biggest screen that you can, if possible.
All right.
So, anything else before we sign off then?
Oh, I'm all good.
All right, cool. Well, yeah, that does it for our review of Wicked for Good. We will catch you all in the next one. Take care.
Take care, everybody.